Hi, what's up? I'm Channel Pup, the mascot for the level-headed fanboy. Now, I know what you guys have been thinking. Where's Pup? Where's Pup? How am I gonna survive without my Channel Pup video? It's alright. I'm here. I was away for a bit doing my first official job in the TV industry. I made it, guys. But now that I'm back, we're going to be ranking every version of the only 3 Sonic levels that exist according to Sega. Green Hill Zone, Chemical Plant Zone, and Sky Sanctuary Zone.
Oh god! You can't be regurgitating content again!
Yes, I can, Cock, and thanks to the wonder of marginal differences. I wasn't really all that proud of my Green Hill Zone ranking video. I tried to be as thorough as possible, but ended up missing a couple of important entries. So I knew that I'd want to go over that subject again, but with a few changes. This time, I won't be ranking anything from, like, Game Gear or any handheld consoles or anything like that, nor will there be racing spin-offs or anything in that regard. It's going to be strictly mainline titles. And I tell you what, you'd still be surprised just how many Green Hill Zones are going to end up on this ranking. Another change, though, is that, yes, I'll be ranking Chemical Plant and Sky Sanctuary Zones as well. And another thing is that the order of my Green Hill ranking will be different this time because of one particular factor. We are now on Update 2 of Sonic Frontiers. Sonic Frontiers hosting a variety of different Green Hill stages. Update number 2 brought about a lot of control changes to Sonic, including an unlockable spin dash, a gradual decrease in acceleration, and a more momentum-charged jump, all of which can be activated in cyberspace, although you still can't do sharp turns for some reason, unless you use the manual spin dash to realign yourself, which, okay, adds a new layer to things, but that's the main thing here, is cyberspace is a completely transformed experience now. What was once the suckiest part of one of my favorite Sonic games is now actually an experience I always look forward to revisiting. And because level design can only really be as good as the gameplay style, it called my entire previous list into question, so there is justification in revisiting this one. And Sega, don't be like me, don't recycle the same ideas, give us some original levels going forward. I'm pleased to hear that Sonic Superstars is going to be entirely original levels. Let's keep that mentality going forward. As for you in the audience, I'm aware my opinion is weird, but it is my own. If you don't like it, just put your own opinions out there on the internet. It's a lot healthier than getting bent out of shape over my own.
Mamma mia. You made it this far into the video and you still haven't subscribed? What in the name of spaghetti and meatballs is this all about? Hey, you boy, why you not subscribe to the channel, Pup, yeah? And click on the link in the Patreon in the description below, or I'll fucking kill you, boy. Don't fucking test me. That's so unspicy meatball. Yes, it is.
Alright, we're gonna start with the Green Hill Zones, and in 19th place, as the all-time worst version of Green Hill Zone, is 3-5 from Sonic Frontiers. So Cyberspace's whole shebang with the level design was taking elements of previous Sonic level designs and rework them to feel much more arcadey while giving them one of 4 coats of paint. And in this case, we have Savannah Citadel Act 2 from Sonic Unleashed with a Green Hill Zone coat of paint. Thing is, Savannah Citadel Act 2 was never really a stage so much as it was just a testing ground for the drift feature. Just a series of curves and bottomless pits. And what we have for 3-5 is just that from a level design standpoint. So, for one, the drift function in Sonic Frontiers only appears here. It's never put to any kind of practical use outside of this stage. So you're given this ability that you're not really given anything interesting to do with. But the drifting state is also toggled not by the player, but by the dash pads. And you cannot break out of that drifting state unless you find a way to get rid of all of your momentum. So basically just put the controller down. The drift is also just incredibly twitchy this time. Easily the worst version of this mechanic. And there's not really any kind of reward for drifting here either. You can just as easily S-rank this stage by just jumping over the drift pads and getting to the end goal by foot. The only difference is you realize even more what a bland level design this is, because it is just a series of turns. This is the worst version of Green Hill Zone on this list. It doesn't work as a showcase of a gameplay mechanic. It doesn't work as a stage in its own right. It's just not very good. In at number 18 is Lost Valley from Sonic Forces, the opening level of the game, and it was, at the time of its release, the worst mainline version of Green Hill Zone. How about that? It's a straight shot forward, a 2D section, and then another straight shot forward. And those straight shot forwards are full of strictly scripted events. Sonic just running by himself, the control constantly being taken away from the player. Sand waterfall sounds kind of cool to run along it, right? But you don't get to do that. Sonic does that all by himself. It's all flashy spectacle with minimal player input, and even for a flashy spectacle, it's still not even that exciting. Even on a theming front, this stage is just bizarre. We're to believe that in this game, Dr. Eggman is going to be on the top of his game. He's going to be the best he's ever been. He's going to take over the world. He's got tons of Death Egg robots. He's a real threat, right? Yet we see his Death Egg Sentinels just laying about, already destroyed by something else that isn't Sonic. Yeah, that's one way of presenting the bad guy as a threat. Show him already defeated. Lost Valley is just weak. In at number 17 is Green Hill, Green Hill. Honestly, it deserves to be that low just for that name alone. Also, the music. Good God. Green Hill suffers from a problem that is pretty intrinsic to the DNA of Sonic Forces. It's very been there, done that, but worse. Green Hill is known for its slopes, its ramps, its seesaws, its swings, and there's a sprinkling of that here and there, kinda. But it's mostly straight shots this time, with little automatic subterranean springs that just propel you in whatever direction you need to go with minimal player input. Now, I don't mind the idea of a stage that just gives the player a chance to just move forward as Sonic and just experience that momentum, but let's not forget that classic Sonic is horrible in Sonic Forces. And here, with as many straight shots as there are in this stage, it really shows off just how iffy that momentum is, as it dips and rises without any kind of reason. I don't understand how that gameplay style came to be. But as I say, a stage can only really be as good as the gameplay style. It could be a well-made stage, but if I don't enjoy playing it, it's no good, and like this stage is not really either. Not even the music is working for this one. Coming in at number 16 is Cyberspace 3-4, this one being a recreation of Windmill Isle Act 3, which was always more kind of a bonusy stage in Sonic Unleashed, in a similar vein to Savannah Citadel Act 2, where its whole thing is to showcase one particular gimmick. In this case, it's a stage built entirely out of rails, and it's all about the timing of your jumps, and in some cases, stomps and air dashes. Truth be told, this stage isn't bad. We're actually past all the bad ones now, but it's a little frustrating and it's not particularly noteworthy, and the whole thing is literally on rails. I kind of like to have a little more to the stages than just one particular gimmick, but I suppose it is kind of cool to see just how far this could be stretched. What's not cool is seeing just how far Green Hill Zone can be stretched from game to game, though. Seriously, Sega, stop it. In at number 15 is Cyberspace 2-1, a mostly downhill shot with a higher path of rails and a lower path of more platformy sections. This is all pulled from the 2D sections of the modern Green Hill Zone stage from Sonic Generations. 2D modern stages have always felt a little bit redundant to me, especially when you consider that, like, classic Sonic is effectively a separate brand these days. Still, this is by no means a bad stage. There is one feature that has been removed, which is the little wall that you had to slide under in the original version of Green Hill Act 2 from Sonic Generations. That's not there anymore, yet we do have a slide ability, so I don't quite understand why they got rid of that. Other than that, it's fine, it's just a little redundant, it's whatever. In at number 14 is Cyberspace 1-1, the opening of Sonic Frontiers, and it's a bit of a whimper of an opening, I must admit. It's perfectly passable. I can give it a singular thumbs up. It's the most basic, vanilla introductory level you could possibly come up with. Now, the layout is Windmill Isle Act 1 from Sonic Unleashed, but that stage was always intended to be more of a tutorial. Now, what you have here is effectively a form of tutorial, I guess. But with Sonic Unleashed, said tutorial was followed up by the second act, which is really the first proper stage of the game. In this case, it's a bit more self-contained than what Windmill Isle Act 1 was. It's there purely to showcase the basics, and that's it. If anything, it's even a little more basic than Lost Valley was, but the difference here is it is at least a bit more interesting to play, partly because control isn't constantly being wrestled away from the player. It's not full of invisible walls. You can actually explore a little bit, not that there's really anything to find. So yes, while it's shorter and simpler than Lost Valley, it at least packs a bit more freedom into the level design. It's just satisfactory, and that's it. In at number 13 is Cyberspace 3-2. This being the 2D sections of Savannah Citadel Act 1 from Sonic Unleashed, which was already a really solid level, and the 2D sections there, You know how I feel about 2D sections in modern games, but admittedly, those were some really cool sections. It was a very energetic stage, and that energy carries over here, with the central gimmick on display being the swing-in poles. And yeah, it feels very rewarding when you get the correct swing-in. It adheres to the upper and lower path philosophy of the best Sonic stages, and while I'm not always, big on the idea of pulling control away from the player for a cinematic event, there is a nice little camera angle change when Sonic grinds his way around this rock structure here. Gives us a really nice sense of the speed. In at number 12 is Cyberspace 1-6. And of all the cyberspace stages in Sonic Frontiers, this is probably one of the ones that feels the most like a 2D classic Sonic stage. Loads of little loop-de-loops that aren't massive cinematic events, lots of alternate paths, and lots of different ramps and curls. It just feels like a classic Sonic stage, and that's because it is one. This was Green Hill Zone Act 1 from Sonic Generations, which was a classic Sonic stage, and it's interesting to be able to play a more modern Sonic in that environment, especially with his incredibly powerful new spin dash, which can fling you to some absurd heights. This is the rare instance of a 2D modern Sonic stage that actually showcases the advantages of the modern Sonic, rather than just feeling redundant. In at number 11 is Green Hill Zone Act 1 from Sonic Generations. Admittedly, yeah, it's the same stage as the previous one on this list, but here you are playing it as it was meant to be played. Not only that, but the theming here is much nicer too, as there's a bit more biodiversity going on rather than being a digital recreation of the Green Hill Zone, which is a cool idea in of itself, but I just like this a little bit more. More immersive. Now, the reason why this one is as low as it is on this list is because it does showcase some of the issues with classic Sonic in Sonic Generations. When he's curled up into a ball, he's incredibly powerful, while when he's on foot, he's a little underpowered. But it is still a really nice recreation of Green Hill Zone, and it's a fairly nice recreation of classic Sonic too, so I'm not going to complain too much. It just ends up a bit more middling on this list. In at number 10 is Cyberspace 1-4. I think this one gave us a really nice view of the cyberspace version of Green Hill Zone and what makes it different from the original. That golden sunset kind of look, the pieces of rock floating in the air. It does feel like a digital recreation of Green Hill Zone existing in this weird void dimension. But I also just love how there are ramps that you can spin dash off of, which will give you enough airtime to fly over parts of the stage, but in a way that feels rewarding rather than broken. This one pulls its level design from Sonic Generations' Green Hill Zone Act 2, which was also a great stage. This is just the 3D segments of that stage. Previously, I did criticize this stage for having some pretty tight turns for a Sonic that doesn't really turn very well, but now that we can realign ourselves using the spin dash, it honestly offers a reward for some pretty skillful play. So that's a negative turned into a positive if I ever saw one. In at number 9 is Guardian Rock. Yeah, admittedly, I surprised myself with this one, a Sonic Forces stage being this high. And yeah, no, the Avatar control still has its own kettle of problems, but like, they're not bad enough to ruin this otherwise really interesting level design. My only disappointment being that it is a completely 2D stage in an otherwise 3D playstyle. But it's one of those rare examples where bringing Green Hill Zone back actually works in a post-Generations world. Because this really was transformed. The majority of this stage is a mechanical factory. Green Hill is mostly dried up and covered in sand now, and there's a massive pyramid in the background. There's also a giant mechanical crab stomping around, which does interact with the stage, as you have to time your jumps in accordance with his stomping feet. There's also lots of rewarding upper paths using the Wisp-Ons as well. This was a really cool twist on Green Hill Zone that honestly didn't feel tired and did enough to justify itself. It's a miracle. In at number 8 is the Green Hill Zone from Sonic Adventure 2. This stage was like a little reward for A-ranking all of the stages and collecting all of the emblems. Sheesh, that is actually a lot to ask now that I think about it. Now, what makes this especially charming is that it was the first time Green Hill Zone was ever brought to 3D. And it was exciting at the time because of that. And the Sonic Adventure 2 gameplay style is a great fit for this. The level design is also really good here. So what's the problem? Why is this so low? Surely this should be in at like number 1 or something. The camera. The camera is the reason. They've tried to emulate a bit of a 2D look here, but there's a lot of very three-dimensional level design. So often you will run into hazards that you have no way of seeing because the camera just isn't looking at them. Unfortunately, marring an otherwise really nice level recreation. Now yes, you do have camera control in Sonic Adventure 2, but it's not going to do much because the camera constantly wrestles its way back into position it wants to be. It's disappointing because again, This is a really good level design. It's got a lot going for it and a really nice playstyle to boot. Just one element got in the way. Just one. God damn. Never underestimate the importance of a good camera angle. In at number 7 is Arsenal Pyramid from Sonic Forces. Everything I said about Guardian Rock reinventing this level in a way to actually justify bringing it back remains true here. Nothing of Green Hill Zone here looks like a Green Hill Zone anymore. It's almost entirely sand and desert, and you spend the majority of the time in a missile factory, with some fairly decent, if a bit basic, platforming as you run from cog to cog. Also, switching between the Avatar's abilities and Sonic's abilities does actually make for a pretty engaging playstyle. One of the better stages in Sonic Forces, admittedly. In at number 6 is Cyberspace 4-5, another Green Hill Sunset stage, this time with completely original level design based entirely around airtime. It generally consists of a straight shot with some obstacles in the way and then a ramp. You go off that ramp and you get to decide which path you want to take going from there. There's usually like 3 paths ahead of you, and it's all about that in-air control. It's a really unique and fun idea for a stage, and I'd welcome more like it, albeit without the Green Hill coat of paint. It's a quick stage, it's not particularly platform heavy, but it does feel fulfilling enough. In at number 5 is Cyberspace 3-1, a stage with lots of egg pawns to beat, platforming sections, pulleys, and that's because it's a recreation of Green Forest from Sonic Adventure 2, but again with the Green Hill coat of paint. And it's a really fun stage with lots of different alternate paths to take. And I love these little sloped, curved platforms here that require the player to keep really good control of Sonic's turning in order to pick up some extra rings. But if you don't keep control of that turning, you're placed on a rail with less rewards. It's a really fun, exhilarating stage that meshes really nicely with the Sonic Frontiers playstyle, even better now that the playstyle's been improved. That being said, use the spin dash sparingly on this one, as this one's pretty in-air platforming heavy. In at number 4 is the original Green Hill Zone from Sonic 1. Not much really needs to be said about this one because it's been said a million times over that this was a feat of excellent level design. From the theming, which yes, it's still good today, don't let any of my belly aching about Green Hill Zone being overused detract from the fact that this was still an excellent piece of art design. There is a reason why this place does keep getting brought back. It doesn't make it right, but still, there is a reason. It's just a phenomenal looking place. The combination of naturalistic designs with Art Deco art style, paired with unforgettable music, that will stay in your head for the rest of your life, and frankly, I welcome it because it's a great piece of music, paired with just excellent level design as well. It's this massive jungle gym to play with Sonic and learn how he feels. A great place to learn to trust this character and trust yourself as a player with this character. Green Hill Zone today is a joy to play through. This was the perfect way to introduce Sonic, and it's no wonder he caught on. In at number 3 is Green Hill Zone from Sonic Mania. Now, admittedly, this was really pushing it on the reuse, but it is admittedly just an amped up, improved version of the Green Hill Zone from Sonic 1. So Act 1 consists of elements of all 3 acts condensed together into one singular act, now with a mini-boss and other elements of Sonic 3 and Knuckles gameplay, such as elemental shields and getting to play with the sign, a personal favorite of mine. Look at it go! But it's Act 2 where things get really interesting as we get a very new spin on the stage. Aesthetically speaking, the tikis that were just around and about in Green Hill Zone have taken the center stage. As we go a little deeper into this iconic landscape, the level design becomes a lot more dense in Act 2. And if it didn't already feel like a jungle gym, which it did, it feels even more like one now that it's got little zip wires. Act 2 just feels like we're going even deeper into the Green Hill Zone, getting closer to those mountains that were in the background last time, and was a really nice way of giving us more of the same. In at number 2 is Green Hill Zone Act 2 from Sonic Generations. Seeing Green Hill Zone brought to HD, playable in 3D, was incredibly exciting back in 2011. We hadn't seen Green Hill Zone since Sonic Adventure 2, and even then it was just an unlockable level for completion. Here it actually served a narrative purpose this time around, and just this whole place looks beautiful. It's still got lots of ramps, slopes, loop-de-loops, swings. That jungle gym vibe of the original Green Hill Zone is still there, but now it's paired with the spectacle of the modern Sonic gameplay style. As you speed through this place like a bullet, you're even chased by a giant piranha robot. It's awesome. This was a perfect way to kick off a celebration of 20 years of Sonic, and an excellent start to one of the best Sonic games of all time. And in at number 1, my personal favorite version of Green Hill Zone ever is Cyberspace 2-6 from Sonic Frontiers. While the whole point of Cyberspace was that these were very short, bite-sized, arcadey style Sonic stages, this stage is absolutely huge. Absolutely bursting with different paths to take and different shortcuts. This stage is just a bit of camera control away from being its own open zone. And there's lots of different ways of approaching this stage as well, whether or not you want to take this little rocket over to the next path, or you'd rather take springs, whether you want to light dash your way up to the next platform, or bash badniks, jump on the propeller springs, or make your way around the long way. It's also a stage that takes wonderful advantage of Sonic's in-air control in Sonic Frontiers. There are times when you're flung off of one rail and you gotta land on another one, but I never found it difficult to land on the right rail. This stage is based on Sky Rail from Sonic Adventure 2, which was, if anything, a shadow stage. But paired with this gameplay style, it's even better than ever. 2-6 is just everything a Sonic stage should be, in a way that almost no two playthroughs are gonna be the same. It's an exhilarating stage that I always look forward to revisiting, and it's usually one of the first ones I will boot up if I'm gonna do an arcade mode run through in Sonic Frontiers. And that's why it's my number 1 pick. So, if that wasn't controversial enough for you, let's move over to Chemical Plant. In at number 15, as my least favorite version of Chemical Plant Zone on this list, is Cyberspace 3-7 from Sonic Frontiers. This stage being the 2D sections of the modern Chemical Plant stage from Sonic Generations, which already there's a bit of a redundancy problem in my opinion anyway. But the bigger problem here is that Update 2 kind of busts this one. This stage is clearly not designed to utilize the spin dash. In fact, I don't think any of the cyberspace stages in Sonic Frontiers were designed with the spin dash in mind, but they make them work for the most part. But this stage kind of falls apart a little bit, as it's easy to just fling yourself way above the level from the very start, and then just for the remainder of the stage leap of faith it. There's also this incredibly egregious little cannon section here, where you have to time it just right or else you'll get caught in a bed of spikes. That would be fine and dandy if it weren't for the fact that I'm required to wait in a gameplay style that's all about getting the best possible time. Even more so than the typical Sonic stage, because cyberspace is all about getting the time. You can't really progress through the game if you're not S-ranking these stages. I mean, you can do other things to get keys, but you get what I'm saying here. You're going to be missing a very important component in getting those keys. In at number 14 is Chemical Plant from Sonic Forces, and I guess what can put that above the previous one here is that it was at least made somewhat for the gameplay style that it's in, but even then, this stage really draws a big ring around the shortcomings of the classic Sonic gameplay style in this game, maybe even more so than Green Hill did. Chemical Plant has a lot of slopes, and classic Sonic in this game has no sense of slope inertia. You can be running down a slope, but you're not going to be picking up speed. In some cases, you're going to be losing it. And as for the level design itself, it doesn't do anything to justify itself being here. It's almost identical to the Chemical Plant Zone in Sonic Generations, with not enough of a difference in gameplay style to even justify that. As a matter of fact, it's worse. It's worse than the previous one. You don't even have the cinematic camera angles when you're going through the pipes. The thing with Sonic Frontiers is that when they do bring back levels, there's usually a slight twist, be it the Chemical Plant being in winter when you're playing it as the Avatar or the modern Sonic, or, Green Hill Zone having the sand everywhere and the mechanical bases and stuff like that. Obviously, Chemical Plant's already a mechanical base, but they've done nothing to change it up here. It feels like it's here out of obligation. In at number 13 is Cyberspace 4-8, which is the shortest cyberspace stage in Sonic Frontiers. Like, it's really short. The S-rank time for this one's literally 30 seconds. It's an original stage, and what's here is certainly kind of inventive. There are some alternate paths here and there, which is surprising for such a short stage, and there's some nice use of in-air control as well, but it's over before it starts. In at number 12 is Cyberspace 2-3. It's a 2D Chemical Plant stage, and this one, just for some reason, strikes me as a bit bland. It's the cyberspace stage where when I boot it up, I'm like, Oh, is that one? Alright, well, I'm not particularly challenged by it. I can get through it. A pretty painless experience, but it doesn't do anything for me. The main thing here is the switch cannons, which, you press the coordinating button that's on the cannon and it will send you in the right direction, but there's not really any kind of punishment for doing these wrong either. Which does actually play in okay with the whole upper and lower path dynamic, with the upper path being mostly on rails and the lower path being mostly on foot. But it just strikes me as such a basic stage, It feels like this one is the one they phoned in. Even the music, okay? Like, I love the cyberspace tracks, but even the music here feels just more like a texture than anything else. In at number 11 is Network Terminal from Sonic Forces. And this is admittedly a pretty solid stage. I do think it suffers from too much 2D, which is a problem with a lot of the modern Chemical Plant stages, is even when they're 3D, they're still mostly 2D. And yeah, this one it's a 2D stage bookended by two 3D segments. The first 3D segment isn't bad as you're making your way into the chemical plant, and it is actually pretty cool to see this thing from the outside. And then the 2D section is admittedly still pretty cool as well, as it's dependent on a lot of weight-based platforming. So there is the pink liquid from the chemical plant zone, the stuff that is famous for, which oddly enough doesn't appear in any of the Frontier stages. But this time the threat isn't drowning, it's that it can push you down, and when it pushes you down, it can push you down bottomless pits, so there are some jumps that you shouldn't make until you're sure that there's no pink liquid dumping down on you. But this also affects the platforms as well, as it can cause certain platforms to spin. Is that actual platforming in Sonic Forces? Holy crap. I kind of just like the world building of this one. It feels like a journey into the chemical plant, and then you're in there, and then you get to the computer room. I think that's pretty solid. I just wish there was more 3D stuff here. In at number 10 is Spaceport from Sonic Forces. Fortunately, this one doesn't look too much like Chemical Plant Zone. They've done quite a design overhaul here with lots of cargo ships making their way in, loads of massive storage containers, a literal train, and it's a space station. And I guess, the chemicals are the fuel for Eggman's ships or something. I don't know, they don't really go into that much detail about that. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't understand why this couldn't be launch-based zone from Sonic 3. I mean, like Chemical Plant, there's still lots of liquid tubage in the launch-based zone. You just gotta take the blue and make it black or purple or yellow or something. I definitely wish there was more emphasis on this being a spaceport with more like rocket ships and more of just a space-agey look to it. But with that said, the level design here isn't actually too bad. It's mostly in 3D, with some cool use of camera perspective changes that don't actually switch the game into 2D, but you're still looking at it from a side-on view, so that's pretty neat. There's clear potential here, and there's a definite interest in doing something a little new with the chemical plant with this stage. It just never quite reaches its full potential. In at number 9 is Chemical Plant Act 1 from Sonic Generations, and this is not to be sneezed at. This is a nice stage, but it is really just a recreation of Chemical Plant and nothing much more. There's not really any new twist to this other than 3D graphics. Everything you'd expect to see is here. The pink liquid, the block platforming in said pink liquid, the tubes, gotta have those tubes. It's more just a shiny coat of paint on the stuff we've already seen before. But it was exciting back in 2011, as it was the first time we would see Chemical Plant done in HD with 3D graphics, and it looks the way you've always imagined it would. I don't revisit this one very often, and I think it's because Chemical Plant, a lot of the joy of that stage is rolling down those really big slopes, and rolling doesn't feel good with the classic Sonic gameplay style in Sonic Generations. You definitely don't get that same sense of speed out of this one as you would in the classic. It just doesn't quite compare, but it is by no means bad. In at number 8 is Cyberspace 4-6. It's the exact same thing. It's the Chemical Plant Act 1 layout from Sonic Generations, now in Sonic Frontiers. The reason why this one's a little higher, though, is because even though Sonic's playstyle is still definitely not a classic Sonic playstyle by any stretch, just spin dashing around these slopes, getting sick airtime just feels really good. It's a really fun stage to play with the new Update 2 abilities that Sonic has in Frontiers. I feel like this level design just complements that really long-reaching, powerful spin dash that grants you insane amount of air times better than it does the slightly nerfed classic Sonic that we had in Sonic Generations, which is why I put this one above. Also, it has one of the better cyberspace music tracks in the game as well. In at number 7 is Cyberspace 1-5. This one is basically Chemical Plant Act 2 from Sonic Generations, but with all of the 2D sections stripped out of it. Now, this is actually kind of nice because one of the criticisms that I do have of the Sonic Generations Chemical Plant is that, yes, it does feel like a 2D stage bookended by two 3D sections, rather than really feeling like a marriage of the two or just a devoted 3D stage, which makes much more sense, especially when you've got a game with both modern Sonic and classic Sonic side by side. It's also funny to see that through cyberspace, we can see that the 3D content of the Sonic Generations Chemical Plant stage amounts to under a minute. And that's also with a slower gameplay style, because Frontiers is a slower game than Sonic Generations. That being said, it's still a great stage. Lots of different paths to take, lots of different ways to play, and this can be quite a fun stage to play around with your spin dash ability as well. And the music as well, also really good. Gives me kind of Marshmallow vibes. In at number 6 is Cyberspace 2-4. This is another really short level. It is one that does feel a bit like it's over before it starts, but at the same time, I am impressed with how much interactivity there is here and how many different little routes there are to take. That's because it's Radical Highway, a stage that boasts a lot of different paths. Whether it's grinding down the cables of the Golden Gate Bridge, or in this case just a chemical plant structure, or swinging from poles, or just doing some intricate platforming, either way works well. And paired with the tighter gameplay style of Sonic Frontiers, this level design does lend well. Also, Hype Street is a banger track. In at number 5 is the original Chemical Plant stage from Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and it cannot be understated that this is the stage where Sonic the Hedgehog was truly cemented as Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, the reason I say this is because, yes, Green Hill Zone was a perfect stage, but after that, Sonic the Hedgehog 1 took more of the form of a conventional platformer. It wasn't until Sonic the Hedgehog 2 where a continuous streak of speed-filled levels really became a thing, and Chemical Plant would be the stage to solidify this. The juxtaposition between this and the second stage of Sonic 1 Marble Zone is just, it's off the charts. It's a completely different thing. It's night and day. Tons of slopes to roll down, the camera can barely keep up with Sonic sometimes. We have our first instance of dash pads. You've got the pink liquid, which slows the player down and risks drowning on the lower path, but the upper path is all speed-based. Chemical Plant solidified what it meant to be Sonic, what it meant to play a Sonic game, and what these games were all about. Again, I understand why it's iconic. That doesn't mean you gotta keep bringing it back every game, though. In at number 4 is Chemical Plant Act 2 from Sonic Generations. Now, yes, I do have the criticism of this basically being a 2D stage bookended by 3D sections, but I mean, theming's gotta count for something, right? The theming of this stage, how they brought Chemical Plant to life in 3D for the first time, it just looks magnificent, and this place is positively exploding. And it's a modern stage, and it's got mostly everything that you would expect from a Chemical Plant stage, including the pink liquid, which was emitted from all of the cyberspace entries. It's an exhilarating, spectacle-filled stage, and the music by Jun Sonoe here is just fantastic. In at number 3 is the version of Chemical Plant from Sonic Mania. So you know the drill. Act 1 is basically Act 1 and 2 condensed into one act, complete with some of the gameplay improvements that would have made their way into Sonic 3 and Knuckles, where Act 2 transforms things just that little bit more. Now, if you said we're making Chemical Plant, but we're injecting elements of Wacky Workbench into it, quite literally, by the way, I would think you're crazy, because Wacky Workbench sucks. But this stage not only gives us a fresh new take on the Chemical Plant stage, it also redeems a lot of concepts from Wacky Workbench. There are more chemicals in the mix here. There are bouncy chemicals that can bounce you to different heights, thereby reaching different platforms. And these chemicals are all their own coordinating color, but then you've got platforms that look like syringes that change the colors. You've also got these cool little conveyor belt platforms and this little DNA thing here, which is pretty cool too. You can even decide the direction you take in certain tubes. This is a complete transformation of the idea of the Chemical Plant stage, while still feeling like an organic part of the Chemical Plant stage. It feels like we've gone just that little bit deeper in there. We've also positively got to talk about the Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine themed boss here. This was one of the most inventive stage remixes in Sonic Mania, and it's just fantastic. In at number 2 is Cyberspace 4-1. This one pulling its level design from Metal Harbor from Sonic Adventure 2, and that was already a fantastic stage. And paired with the tighter gameplay style of Sonic Frontiers, this one is even better. Wait, what the fuck? Everything Metal Harbor is known for is here, aside from that fantastic music and theming. The music's still great though. You've got tons of alternate paths you can take, whether you want to platform it, homing attack your way through, or you just want to use the light dash. There's a great sense of verticality. One of the few instances where using the quick step is a good idea in Sonic Frontiers. But best of all, you get to skateboard through the chemical plant at the very end. This is awesome. Once again, Sonic Adventure 2 level design is just everything Sonic level design should be. So it stands to reason that playing this is just everything a Sonic experience should be. And then in at number 1 is Cyberspace 4-3, which is a completely original take on the chemical plant stage. This stage feels like a continuation of the Sonic Adventure 2 style of level design, yet it's completely original this time around. Complete with a nice open space, and lots of different paths to take. You've got the pulleys, which are very reminiscent of Green Forest. You've got instances of railings on top of platforms, just like in Final Rush. You've got these more non-linear platforming areas, which feel a little bit more like Radical Highway. This just feels like a big love letter to the Sonic Adventure 2 school of level design, and if we're getting more like this in future games, it's absolutely welcome. I can give or take the chemical plant aesthetic. I'd definitely rather have a more original theme here, but this level is just such a gift to the Sonic Adventure 2 fan in me. And that's why it takes the number 1 spot on my list of chemical plant stages. And now it's time for the 9 Sky Sanctuary stages ranked. So in at number 9, we have Cyberspace 2-5, which is by no means a bad stage. I want to get that out there, that none of these stages are bad here. That's partly thanks to the fact that Sky Sanctuary wasn't in Sonic Forces, so it didn't have a chance to get a shitty level design. Cyberspace 2-5 is the 2D sections of Sky Sanctuary Act 2 from Sonic Generations, and I'll said it till the cows come home, it's the redundancy issue for me, this one. But it's perfectly fine, there's nothing really wrong with this, so there's not really any more to be said. Just a lot of been there, done that, and I'm much more interested in the 3D sections. In at number 8 is Cyberspace 2-7, which is the Act 1 Sky Sanctuary from Sonic Generations, which at least gives us something a little more interesting because we're able to play the modern Sonic in a level that is comprised of classic Sonic design sensibilities. As it is, this one was like a full designated level rather than just one section of an existing level. They've gotten rid of the Marble Garden style spinning tops, so I'll let you decide whether or not that's a good or a bad thing. Personally, I like them. I think they do change it up, but I can kind of also understand why there are people that don't like them either because of the physics of them, and they do slow down the pace of the stage. This is a bit more of a fast approach. I also really love the chill vibe the music for this one has. That one definitely elevates this a little bit too. On a whole, I don't have much to say about 2-7, so I'm gonna move on. In at number 7 is Cyberspace 2-2, comprised of these different layers of rotating platform because this is the rotating platforming section from Dragon Road. And I wish we could have had more of the Dragon Road level here, maybe get the full thing rather than just this section, but as it stands, this is still a damn good platforming section. Even better now thanks to the more reliable air dash of Sonic Frontiers, but it is imperative that you do tread carefully on this one. You should tread carefully on this, yeah. Either that or have a great deal of confidence in what you're doing. I, for one, like using the bounce and then the air dash here to platform. This stage makes great use of that and does reward the player for thinking outside the box a little bit. Meaning that you can complete this platforming section here even faster, even more slick if you use the right skills than you would in its original Sonic Unleashed counterpart. This is a good bit of platforming. I just wish we had a bit more done with it rather than it just being, that's the entire level, In at number 6 is Sky Sanctuary Act 1 from Sonic Generations, and what a terrific bit of level design this is. This is a very densely packed version of the Sky Sanctuary level. No, we don't have Mecha Sonic here, but we do have things like the spinning tops from Marble Garden, as well as just a much more vast exploration of this stage than what we got in Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Everything has been beautifully expanded upon here, and all of the platforming elements that made that original stage great have been brought to life perfectly here, such as the spinning platforms, the teleporter balls, the collapsing platforms, and the bouncy clouds. There's even wildlife dotted around this place, especially with these little budgies here. This was a fantastic adaptation of the classic Sky Sanctuary stage. I only wish you had a Mecha Sonic here, or at least a little reference to him anyway. Ah well. In at number 5 is Anxiety. Sorry, I meant Cyberspace 3-6. This stage is a nightmare, but I mean that in a positive way. It reminds me a lot of Hyponia from Klonoa 2 in that you're constantly flirting with a bottomless pit. Now, I'm not big on bottomless pits in Sonic games. I think it's very dimpsy, frankly, but in this case I can kind of forgive it because it feels like an integral part of this stage. This is one for the platforming experts, but it's also a fickle stage that you can't trust. What I mean by this is that you've got these button cannons again. Press the coordinating button to be sent in the correct direction. If you don't press a button or you press the wrong one, you just get dropped. But there are some where you really don't want to press the coordinating button because you'll end up with a face full of spikes. So it's on your judgment to decide whether or not that's a good idea. It constantly keeps you on your toes. You can't even trust your homing attack, as you gotta time it perfectly. This is a fantastic stage. It's incredibly intense. I died a lot on my first time playing through it, and I'm happy to see the cyberspace stages actually get genuinely a little challenging. In at number 4, we have the original Sky Sanctuary stage from Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and I feel a bit guilty just putting it at number 4, but that's not a testament to this being bad or anything. It's a testament to how good the subsequent stages on this list are. Sky Sanctuary is a single act, and it's very much a playable story event. But don't let that discredit this as a level, because it is still a great bit of level design. With a boss gauntlet in there as well, as you fight against Mecha Sonic in 2 of Dr. Robotnik's existing contraptions, and then finally, you just fight Mecha Sonic mano a mano. One thing worth noting is that this original iteration of the stage was definitely a lot more green than subsequent versions would be, with some more Art Deco technological areas. So yeah, the modern version of Sky Sanctuary was quite a redesign. This was a pivotal place in the story of Sonic 3 and Knuckles. You finally teamed up with Knuckles, and you guys are en route to the Death Egg to take Dr. Robotnik down once and for all. It's an awesome stage for that alone, but then you pair it with good level design, Mecha Sonic, and you've got an iconic level. Again, it is no wonder that this is the stage that they keep bringing back for later entries. Not that they should, but I understand why this is the one. In at number 3 is Sky Sanctuary Act 2 from Sonic Generations. This stage I absolutely fell in love with. This was where Sonic Generations clicked the most for me on that first playthrough. Because modern Sonic stage design up until this point was still pretty narrow, like a lot of corridors, a lot of straight shots, where this opened things up a lot more. This was a platform-centric stage that you didn't really want to boost your way through. And that was everything that I'd been craving from the boost formula of Sonic. But I also just love how this stage really takes you on that journey. You've got collapsing towers, you enter some of the more indoor sections as you make your way over to the Death Egg. This is just such a great stage, and this was one of the first instances of Sonic Generations really coming into its own and separating itself from Sonic Unleashed. In at number 2 is Cyberspace 1-2. Now this one takes its level design from Windmill Isle Act 2 from Sonic Unleashed, but it's very transformative in that I wouldn't have really noticed if you didn't point it out to me. But also, yes, it has been heavily condensed. It's now all about prioritizing hurrying to the finish line as quickly as you can, and you really want to do that as this one has one of the tougher S-rank criterias in the entire game. It's all about finding out which route is going to work for you, and it does abide by that tight upper path versus lower path mentality, but in some cases, it's actually smarter to use the lower path. Getting that S rank is going to require some trial and error for this one. There's a good sense of speed, but there's also a good sense of platforming to it as well, especially if you take the upper path. I think this stage perfectly encapsulates what cyberspace was all about, this very arcadey trial and error style of gameplay. Also, gotta love the music. And in at number 1 is Cyberspace 3-3. So what we have here is literally the 3D sections of Sky Sanctuary Act 2 from Sonic Generations. Any and all 2D sections have been completely stripped out of this one, and the stage has been reworked to fit that cyberspace level design philosophy of rushing your way to the very end, getting that S-rank time. But it's made 1,000 times more exhilarating by the fact that Sonic can now spin dash by the moveset that he has in Update 2 of Sonic Frontiers. This would not have taken the top spot before Update 2 came along. But you can flow your way through this stage in a way that you never could in Sonic Generations. And thanks to Frontiers Sonic's much better in-air control, you can actually take a lot of those alternate paths a lot easier now. I also love the sunset aesthetic of this one as well. Though I will say I do prefer the more varied look of Sky Sanctuary Act 2 from Sonic Generations. In that you've got some darker areas, some more indoor areas, but on a whole, this one is just a more fun one to play, and I find myself replaying it a lot. Everything that made Sky Sanctuary Act 2 from Generations good is still here, but now it's paired with an even more versatile Sonic. And the stage at this point has just been absolutely perfected. So that about wraps it up for my rankings of the only 3 Sonic zones according to Sega. And I'm aware that my opinions are pretty strange in places. I get it. I know that there's a lot of people that would put the originals at the very top, and I understand why. I want to make clear that even if they don't make number 1, I can't understate the importance that the original versions of these levels had. They are the most important versions and the definitive versions, but I'm talking about how much I enjoy playing through these stages. If you object to my opinion, best thing to do is leave yours in the comments below. What do you guys think? What are your favorite versions of these stages? Do you hope Sega ever bring them back again, or are you like me and just think, let's put them to bed? Comment below, discuss, and as always, if you enjoyed this video and you want to support more like it, be sure to hit subscribe, hit the like button, and in the description below is a link to the Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you can get your name in the credits of these videos, but most of all, I just really appreciate it. It helps me through those bills. And now a special shout out for the patrons in the $10 tier. Their names are God Goku, Sharif, Dan Denny, Kale Bennett, That Jordo, King K, Dr. SB, what? No PSA? What's going on here, man? Sugio, Cyrus the Skeptic, did you know the skin on your elbow is called a weenus? Now the $5 tier, where we have SSS06, Dazzle Fizzle, and Vera Wild. Thank you, good folks, so much for your generosity. It does not go unappreciated or unnoticed. And as for those of you at home watching, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. The video is over.